They called him the Runt, a small bay horse with knobby knees and a peculiar gait that made the racing elite chuckle. In 1936, a man paid a mere $8,000 for him, pocket change in the world of thoroughbred racing. Most thought it was $8,000 too much. But this isn't just a horse story. This is a story of three broken souls who found each other when America herself was broken. The year was 1936. The Great Depression had ravaged the nation. Men who once stood tall now stood in breadlines. Dreams were luxuries few could afford. Amidst this backdrop of despair, a most unlikely hero emerged. James Fitzsimmons, one of racing's legendary trainers, had little patience for the small bay colt. The horse spent most of his days eating and sleeping, showing no interest in running, much less racing. That one's not worth the hay he eats. Fitzsimmons would grumble to his stable hands. By age 2, the Runt had run 35 races with only 5 wins to his name. He was shipped to California, sold for a fraction of his bloodline's worth. Another failure in a nation becoming all too familiar with the word. Meanwhile, Henry Carpenter had once been a bicycle repairman who made a fortune selling automobiles. Life had blessed him with success beyond measure, until 1926, when his 15-year-old son was killed in a car accident. The very machines that had built his empire had taken what he loved most. In his grief, Henry turned to horses, beautiful creatures that had preceded the mechanical beasts that now dominated American roads. Perhaps, he thought, in their speed and grace, he might find some fragment of healing. Then there was Samuel Jenkins, an odd man by most accounts. He slept under the stars more often than a roof, spoke little, and seemed to understand animals better than people. The racing establishment viewed him with suspicion, a vagrant who somehow knew horses. Horse don't need to talk, Jenkins would say, just needs someone to listen. And finally there was Richard Donovan, a tall, gangly jockey with a quick temper and one eye that didn't quite work right. He'd been riding since he was 15, bouncing between tracks, living out of a suitcase. The racing world had nearly forgotten him, a half-blind rider whose career was fading faster than daylight in December. In 1936, these 4 broken souls, a wealthy businessman mourning his son, an eccentric trainer who slept under the stars, a half-blind jockey, and a lazy, underachieving racehorse, somehow found each other. After purchasing the Runt, Henry asked Samuel to train him. "What do you see in this horse?" Henry asked, looking at the small, unimpressive animal. Samuel ran his weathered hand down the horse's leg. "He's angry, been mistreated. Not lazy, just lost the will. But there's fire in him." Henry couldn't see it, but he trusted Samuel, and Samuel trusted the horse. Richard came later, after several jockeys had refused to ride the Runt regularly. When he first mounted, the horse seemed to sense Richard's disability. He turned his head, as if making eye contact with his one-eyed rider. "We understand each other, don't we?" Richard whispered. "Nobody believes in either of us." Samuel had unusual training methods. He let the Runt sleep late. He planted an old milk goat in the stall for companionship. He fed him more than the standard ration. Most important, he talked to him. Not the way men talk to horses with commands and clicks. The way men talk to friends. "He's been running scared his whole life," Samuel explained to Henry one evening as they watched the horse eat, whipped and spurred by fellows who thought they could beat speed into him. "We're going to let him find his own reason to run." The first race was in 1936 at a small California track. The odds were 10-1 against them. No one expected much. "Just let him run his race," Samuel told Richard before they entered the starting gate. Richard nodded, understanding exactly what that meant. Don't force him. Let him find his rhythm. When the gates opened, the Runt didn't bolt forward like the other horses. He settled into a comfortable pace near the back of the pack. The crowd groaned. Another disappointing performance. But then, halfway through the backstretch, something changed. The small bay horse's ears perked forward. His stride lengthened. Without Richard applying the whip, the runt began passing horses one by one. By the final turn, he was third, then second. The crowd noise grew. "Look at that little horse go," someone shouted. In the final furlong, the runt pulled alongside the leader, a magnificent black stallion, twice his size. For a moment they ran neck and neck. Then, with a burst that seemed to come from nowhere, the small bay horse surged ahead. He won by 2 lengths. In the winner's circle, Henry had tears in his eyes. Samuel stood quietly, nodding as if he'd known all along. Richard couldn't stop grinning. "He just needed to remember what it feels like to win," Samuel said. Over the next year, the runt won race after race. His reputation grew. Newspapers began to take notice of the small horse with the peculiar gait, who couldn't be beaten. America, desperate for anything to cheer about during those dark Depression years, found a hero in this unlikely champion. But the racing establishment remained skeptical. The runt wasn't running against the best, they said. He was a West Coast phenomenon, but the real champions raced in the East. Then came the match race that would change everything. Admiral's Pride was the undisputed king of American horse racing. Tall, powerful, impeccably bred, he had never lost a race. His owner, a wealthy banker from old money, had refused all challenges to race the runt. "I won't risk my horse's reputation against that glorified plow horse," he told reporters. But public pressure mounted. America wanted to see the race. Finally, a date was set, November 1st, 1938. The location, Pimlico Race Course in Baltimore. The nation came to a standstill that day. Radios across America tuned in. Factories stopped work so employees could listen. In bread lines, men huddled around portable radios. That morning, Richard discovered he couldn't see out of his good eye. A mysterious swelling had nearly closed it. He said nothing, fearing he would be replaced. In the paddock before the race, Henry noticed Richard squinting. "Are you all right?" he asked. "Just fine, sir," Richard lied. Samuel knew better but said nothing. Instead, he whispered to the horse, "You'll have to be his eyes today." Admiral's Pride was the heavy favorite. Sleek and powerful, he pranced into the starting gate, while the runt stood calmly, almost sleepily. The starting bell rang. Admiral's Pride exploded from the gate, taking an immediate lead. The runt, as was his custom, started slow. "He's giving him too much lead," Henry shouted, his face pale with worry. But Samuel remained calm. "Trust the horse," he said quietly. By the halfway point, Admiral's Pride led by 6 lengths. The announcer was already declaring victory. The crowd was beginning to sense disappointment. Richard, seeing only shadows through his one barely functioning eye, could feel the rhythm of the runt beneath him. He hadn't urged the horse yet, trusting Samuel's instructions to let him run his own race. Then, as they rounded the final turn, Richard felt a change. The runt lowered his head slightly. His breathing deepened. His stride lengthened. "Now," Richard whispered, as if in answer, the runt accelerated. The gap began to close. 5 lengths. 4. 3. The crowd noise swelled like a wave. Admiral's Pride's jockey looked back, panic crossing his face. He raised his whip, slashing at his mount. Richard didn't reach for his whip. He didn't need to. The runt was flying now, eating up ground with each powerful stride. With 100 yards to go, they were neck and neck. The sound from the grandstand was deafening. Admiral's Pride fought valiantly. For a moment the 2 horses thundered down the stretch as one. Then the runt found something extra, some reserve of heart that transcended muscle and bone, and surged ahead. He crossed the finish line a length in front. Radio announcers across America screamed into their microphones. The crowd at Pimlico erupted. In living rooms and factories and bread lines, people cheered and wept. Samuel smiled his quiet smile. Henry embraced Richard as he dismounted, noticing for the first time the nearly closed eye. "You rode blind?" he asked in disbelief. Richard patted the horse's sweaty neck. "I just had to trust him. He knew what to do." The Depression continued for several more years, but something changed in America that day. A small, overlooked horse had defeated the giant. The impossible had happened. If the runt could triumph against such odds, perhaps ordinary Americans could too. Henry Carpenter went on to become a leading advocate for racing safety reforms. Samuel Jenkins trained horses well into his 70s, never changing his unorthodox methods. Richard Donovan recovered his sight and rode for another decade, though he would always say no victory ever matched that day at Pimlico. And the runt? He retired in 1940, having won 33 of his 89 races, and setting a new world record for earnings. When he died in 1947, newspapers across America ran front-page obituaries. But of course, Americans didn't know him as the runt. By then the whole nation knew his real name, Seabiscuit. And now you know the rest of the story.